some competing business in Australia today, but this is our LinkedIn Live Wednesday chat. And I'm Joe Grabowski. I oversee the U.S. operations for Treasury Talent, joined as always by Scotty, our resident mountain man out in Utah. Scotty, how's it going?
Can't complain. We're getting winter weather finally this weekend, Joe. So I'm hoping for more snow. I know how you feel about that, but this is exciting times. It's been too hot for November.
Don't need to hear anything about that. Snow is a four-letter word, and we are very fortunate to be joined by Amanda Vedder, Managing Director of Turnpoint FX. Amanda, how are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
No, of course. Thanks for joining us. Where in the world are you located?
I am right outside of Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, where all the action is happening right now.
Yeah, between where you're at and where I'm at in the world, I think there's a lot of attention being paid to what's happening. Although I think they did claim Michigan, but it's under scrutiny. So we'll see how that all shakes out.
It might take a while.
Yeah, it's interesting how with all the technology we have, we're still relying on a somewhat archaic system. But that's all we'll say about it. So, Scotty, with that, are you ready to jump into questions?
So yes, I am ready to jump into questions. I wasn't when you asked, but now I am. And Amanda, thank you again so much for joining. You've had a successful career in banking and have now pivoted into the fintech space. Just in terms of some of the highlights throughout your career, what would you like to talk to us about today?
Probably, I guess first and foremost, I'm very grateful for the opportunities I've had in my career. Not everyone has had the same opportunities to advance and really look at different verticals within banking, treasury, risk management. So I've had a lot of great people that I've met along the way, a lot of great mentors and people who have advocated for me within the organization that I've been in. Because I've kind of taken a unique approach in terms of, working through different channels, I think it's also given me a unique perspective in terms of looking at a company, looking at treasury, and a more holistic view of, how things operate from that perspective. So I started right after college. I spent approximately the first 10 years of my career in foreign exchange. So I got the capital markets experience covering commercial, large corporate based in the Midwest. So really got a firm understanding of, how things work from that perspective, a great risk management and accounting background. While I was doing that, I went back and got my MBA. I was looking at other, practitioners in the market and seeing what kind of background they had, and figured, hey, it may not be a bad thing to have, at some point in time in my career. So had the great opportunity of doing that while I was working. And, it was really interesting. After I finished my MBA, I was at the top, of my game in foreign exchange. I had an amazing portfolio. I was above goal, very well liked and respected within the organization. And at that point in time, I looked around and Dodd-Frank was just starting to creep its way into the market. And I saw how it would potentially impact, the foreign exchange market and the types of structures that I was selling. So I decided to basically to change. I mean, I went from, being a top practitioner in foreign exchange to move over to commercial banking and do business development. So it was a big move, but I figured in FX, one, it was a changing industry, and two, I was at the top of my game and I was only going to go down from there. So I might as well just go down in the direction I wanted to go. So was able to go into commercial banking, get some credit training, understand that part of the business, because I really want to understand how foreign exchange worked within the overall relationship, and on the client side, how risk management drove other factors, financial factors as well. So, was able to do that for a few years and then got recruited over to the treasury side. I don't think I necessarily wanted to be in treasury or had thought of myself as being someone someone in treasury, but, there was a need for someone to cover an international treasury role. And I, decided to do that, and really thought that it was a great opportunity to put a lot of my skill sets together. And, that's when I really saw the advantage of having that holistic view and looking at different verticals at the same time and different views. So, taking jobs and expanding my skill set, over the last 10 years, I think has really positioned me now, because I have the experience and the knowledge set across multiple channels. So, we're really seeing a convergence of technology, finance, accounting in Treasury, in the C-suite, how, systems are working together, and having those different kind of skill sets have really helped me, become more sought after, because, I took that chance and moved across verticals, opposed to just staying in kind of FX management.
Yeah, that's great insight. And it's so before I jump into the next question, I did absolutely forget, Treasury community, if you have any questions for Amanda along the way, don't just feel free to jump in. Don't just let it be me and Scotty peppering her with questions. She's happy to take any questions that you have, but so please ask them. Scotty, you're paying attention, you're monitoring that. That's why you're on mute, I know that. So going back to what you were saying, you've obviously experienced a lot of success. You've pivoted a couple of times in your career. What's the one piece of advice for people listening right now that you wish you knew, or that you could tell the 21-year-old version of you?
Oh gosh, where do I start, right? I think the biggest thing would be, be flexible, be agile, remain open to roles that you would have never considered in the past. Nobody knows what the landscape's going to look like. There are obviously shocks in the market, and things come up that no one is expecting. So, if you have a plan for your career and you're going to do 2 years as a VP and then move into an SVP and then all the way up to managing director, that's just not a realistic, view. I mean, maybe that's how your career will progress. And I definitely thought that that's how I would progress within an institution. But for me, realistically, it just didn't happen that way. Part of it was I wanted to learn different areas of banking, finance, treasury. And then also, personally, I just needed to make changes because of what I was, doing with my personal life. And I didn't necessarily have the opportunity to move into management because I had, other things that were going on. So, I had a mentor who really pushed me to think of it in terms of putting another feather in your cap, in terms of learning a different skill set, opposed to, just pushing forward as fast and furiously as you can. So that would be the advice is, look at what you can control and what you can't control, embrace change quickly, make changes, and move forward. So we're all trying to figure it out together. And the more agile and flexible you are, the easier it's going to be. And, your mental health will be better as well.
Yeah, I love that, Amanda. We often talk about for people focusing on more of an outline than a plan, right? So that you kind of build in that flexibility in your career. And to your point, I mean, life is all about expectations. So if you have certain expectations that don't get met, that's obviously an easy way to be disappointed. So the flexibility piece is super important. Sorry, go ahead. You were going to say?
Oh, and I would add timing. I definitely had things that I wanted to achieve, and I thought I was going to achieve it in a year or two, but it may have taken 10. But I still got there, and things that I thought I would achieve in 10 years, I would achieve in 2. So it's really just, there's so many outside factors that you just can't even take them into consideration. You just have to move forward and do it the best you can with what you have. Awesome. Love it.
You mentioned that you had a mentor, and I think this question's kind of 2 parts. So first of all, it's hard to get a mentor without focusing on networking and building relationships. So curious, what your approach has been to networking throughout your career, and what advice you have for our listeners, and also with regard to mentorship, whether it's informal or formal. any suggestions for our audience here on how to find a mentor or approach people for mentorship? So I know that's a lot, but
no, I think it's
hand in
so
hand.
important. And most of my opportunities, I didn't seek out. People sought me out. So, being connected is so important because, I took on roles that people thought I would be a good fit for, and I didn't even know they existed. So I've never gone out and said, I want this role and I'm going to do this next. It's always been, these are the opportunities that have come my way, and I've just taken the best one that I thought was the best fit at that time. So I think networking is more important now than ever, just because of the changing dynamics in the workplace. You're not seeing people every day, so you're not interacting with them. So you really have to be very, thoughtful in terms of networking and reaching out to people, or you could sit in front of a computer all day and not talk to anybody. So that just, for me, that just doesn't work. It's kind of lonely. And I like talking to people. I like engaging with people and learning, and networking, like you mentioned, is a great way to find your mentors. That's where you find your thought leaders. The people that you can call when you're stuck on something and you just need to talk through a problem or a situation. So those people have been very instrumental in my life. Not only that, most people are very open to helping. They want to help, and they'll expand their network. So I've gotten connected to people that I couldn't ever connect with one-on-one, but through a mentor who is 20, 30 years senior. Now they're my best friend and are pulling for me and trying to get me connected. So I always look for people, though, who, are obviously interested in me, but from my perspective are the ones who are going to push me and ask the tough questions. I want the people who are really going to engage and, help me be a better thinker. And, I was talking to one of my former managers at Bank of America yesterday, and man, she was just grilling me. And I'm like, wow, I thought we were friendly and but she was straight to the point. And, she was just like, bam, 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 bam. Like, why'd you do that? What'd you do there? That sort of thing. But at first it was very uncomfortable and I was not necessarily prepared for the conversation, but afterwards I was like, wow, thank you, Liz. Thank you for walking me through that thought process, because it really helps. So I think the biggest takeaway is people are generally open, and, ask them to ask you the tough questions, and, be open to feedback and tell them, I want the feedback, good, bad, or indifferent, and I'm not going to be offended if you tell me that I handled the situation really badly and I should have done something differently. So definitely network, though. It's a huge, and it's very instrumental, and I see the impact of it over 20 years.
So along the terms of mentorship, I have to ask the question. Obviously, you have a mentor or a couple of mentors. Do you keep an eye out for opportunities to take on a mentee?
Yeah, I mean, and I honestly, pick out people that I want to mentor because I feel like I can make an impact on them. And I feel like I'm always approachable as well. So if people reach out to me and, want to have a conversation, I'm certainly always open to that. People have given me so much over my career in terms of advice and opportunities. I feel like I need to do the same in terms of, paying it forward. And I feel like most people who have been or are in a very senior leadership role feel the same way. So, just wanting to give back and wanting to help you, even if they're telling you things that you don't necessarily want to hear, that's honestly helping you as well. So.
Definitely. Is there anything specific that you look for as you're trying to identify your mentees?
I look for diversity, and I look for people who are in different industries or have different backgrounds than I do. I know plenty of people just like me, and we all get together and we have a great time over drinks. But I'm definitely always looking for someone who's different, in certain ways, whether it's their skill set or how they've gotten to where they are in their career. I want to broaden my knowledge base as much as possible. So, talking to the engineer at the fintech company, and I don't understand half of the things he has to say, and he's sending me articles on supply chain, and I'm like, wow, this is over my head, you're so smart. But I feel like I can incorporate that information and it makes me a better practitioner.
No, it's awesome. I love it because we get asked questions quite a bit, like, hey, how do I even find a mentor? This usually comes from people who are younger in their career, but the whole idea is it's a two-way street. Like, you can't just take. You're taking on mentees because you want to learn something from them too.
Absolutely. And I reach out to people all the time, and I'm like, look, like, I don't know anything about what you do. Like, you may think I'm smart in these areas, but I know nothing about what you do. And as of right now, like, you're the smartest person in the room, like, teach me, So I think it's also being humble and understanding that, you need to be just as open as they are.
Definitely. It's awesome. I love your outlook on that. So, we've talked about it. You've mentioned it throughout the course of your career. It's taken a couple of different pivots, but the most recent one was a pivot to a startup. What was the catalyst for that change?
Gosh, it was kind of one of those things. It's funny. I went back. I was going through my notes from like business school, and I had to do like an entrepreneurship project, and I had outlined something like this on the FX startup side. When I finished B school, like 10-ish years ago. But at that point in time, like, there was no Dodd-Frank and everyone was so tied to the banks, and that was the best. And nobody would have said like, oh, you do foreign exchange with anybody outside of your bank. It just didn't exist. It wasn't even a possibility. So it just shows you how things change. The landscape changes with, things that are completely out of your comprehension. Could I have thought that like Dodd-Frank would come in and then we would have COVID and all this digital integration, and most people would be doing their foreign exchange through a platform and a file opposed to calling the desk. I mean, you just don't foresee that kind of stuff. So I think it, with my current company, Turnpoint, it came down to the right opportunity at the right time. So you kind of have these things in the back of your head, like, oh, I'd really like to do this. I'd really like the opportunity to join a startup and see what that experience was like. And it became more and more important as Treasury was changing and as startups were becoming part of the Treasury landscape and an important partner within the whole ecosystem. So, when I met Jason Langston, the founder, and the team that I had worked with at Wells, I saw the vision that he had, the opportunity in the market, and then an opportunity for me to grow personally. And it was kind of a no-brainer at that point in time. I'm like, it's either now or never in terms of doing that. So it really has to do with what's the opportunity that's, staring you in the face at this moment than necessarily saying, oh, this is a great time for me to join a startup. I want to go out and do that right now. Because the reality was I couldn't have found that. It kind of came to me organically.
All right, that's awesome. So you've just given us the why you joined, but now what's the what, so to speak? What is Turnpoint FX?
So Turnpoint is, it's a group of practitioners. So these are all folks that have been in the market. I mean, we've all lived through 0809 from a risk management standpoint. So it's a culmination of professionals who basically have come together and seen a need in the market. From what I can tell, there's so much digital integration. I mean, Treasury, in terms of domestic treasuries, straight, payments or receivables have taken their own direction, but foreign exchange has kind of lagged behind from the full integration, just because of the nature of the business. You talk to your FX advisor and you go through a desk, and it's just separate, and it's always been separate, where Turnpoint really takes a different perspective in terms of fully integrating that process, but knowing that there's a risk management component. So, there is exposure there to a capital market with a changing rate. So, it really is taking that step back and saying, all right, what is the materiality of that exposure and how does it fit into the overall landscape of the financial situation within the company? So, how are financial statements being read? How are decisions being made by the C-suite? Is it top line revenue, bottom line revenue, EBITDA? And then backing into that from a digital integration perspective, and then fully understanding the risk management component as well. So it's been a very interesting value proposition. And from what I've seen, approaching clients, they're very open to having these discussions, and more companies that I didn't even foresee moving over to a startup are certainly open to it and making the move.
It's fascinating, and especially with all the volatility we've experienced over the last 8-9 months or so, there's FX is back in the spotlight. Not that it wasn't before, but there's certainly been a higher focus along with that in cash and liquidity. So it's a good time to be in this business and having those conversations. If I'm sitting in the treasurer's seat today, you kind of touched on this, but why am I working with Turnpoint? Sounds like you're taking a very consultative approach and that you're trying to customize as much as you can to the needs, but what's build out on the value prop for me?
No, I mean, I think, they're competing principles. When you try to digitize Treasury, sometimes risk management gets lost because you're so focused on working with the ERP systems and the Treasury management systems and the banks. And then nobody's sitting back and saying, all right, how do all of these things fit together? What is my end product? What is my end goal? So from that perspective, I think we really help our clients work through that. And then also putting the pieces together. There's no perfect bank out there. There's no perfect fintech. There's no perfect treasury management system. The reality is, if you're looking at a treasury suite and going digital, you need to put probably one of each or three of each, or, there has to be a mix of products and services that make sense to get to what you need to achieve. So one is figuring out what the goal is. What do you need to do from a reporting, reconciliation, risk management, accounting perspective? And then two, how do you get there? So, we're able to put, the product mix together for our clients, understanding what their needs and objectives are and what the drivers are. And, it's not just, risk management or digitalization. It's also all the analytics and information. Information reporting is all, coming into play from a reconciliation perspective. It's really the perfect storm with all of these ERP systems going to the cloud. And, that's what I was doing at B of A and Wells Fargo, was just, everybody's getting pushed off their legacy systems. So they literally have to whiteboard the whole thing over again. And it's an interesting process because there's so many different layers and so many different people involved in the process. So, being able to walk a client through that and then putting the proper systems in place is really, where our strengths are. And then also on the FX side, the banks are not as interested in some of these types of business lines. They're not as interested in taking the longer dated positions or some of the more sophisticated hedging structures. So we just integrate that as part of the entire risk management strategy. So it's giving you multiple layers there. And it's been really interesting. I've learned a ton. And I learn something new every day. It's amazing what's out there. And it's amazing how many, how many of these products are converging on. And if I was a treasurer, I'd be confused. I mean, I would not know where to go, what to look at, prioritize, who knows what they're doing, who doesn't know what they're doing, who's going to, sell me, a line and a product and not get me through to implementation and, an actual product sitting on my desk. So, that's, I think, the real benefit is we've all been in the market, everyone at Turnpoint, and we've been doing this for so long. We know the technology, we know the strategy, and, we're going to point you in the right direction, at least give you constructive, honest feedback.
No, that's awesome, and that's exactly. I mean, there are just a lot of similarities with how we operate in the recruiting space, right? It's like we're going to give you a no BS assessment on whether or not you're going down the right route, and we can provide you with an option, but that's all it is an option. If it's right for you, then let's talk. Let's continue the conversation. If not, we'll try to point you in the right direction.
Absolutely. And, I think everybody wants these, like, you get stuck on these like really sexy, like digitalization and, God, I mean, there's so many different words, straight through processing, and it's all out there, right? But it's like, how much do you want to disrupt the system to get there, and how much do you want to pay for it too, right? So it's always that discussion, because yeah, you can do a lot of great things. I mean, these ERP systems are really nifty, but you got to build these files and API. It's out there, but do you know how to use it and fully integrate it? So it's also like, what's a realistic expectation that's an executable project that we can actually get you from start to finish? And a lot of times, I've seen so many of my clients go down the route with some of these other providers, and they just can't get to the right place where they want to be. They're stuck in implementations, or they can't get through credit or what have you. So I'm all about being honest up front and being like, hey, it's going to cost you a lot of money to get there, and if that's important to you, or if it's integrated, I mean, if it's necessary for a business model to remain competitive, then that's one thing. But, how, what do you need, and what's it going to take to get there? And the reality is a lot of these bank platforms are really good too. So it's also like business optimization and figuring out, what you have is actually not that bad and it's not that broken. Let's just pull in some pieces to make it a little bit better. So having those more real conversations opposed to a sales pitch.
Yeah, it's kind of the three options: good, quick, and cheap. You can only pick two of the three, right?
Pretty much. And the problem is nobody really knows. I mean, you talk to the CFO and he says one thing, you talk to the accounting folks, they say something else, and then the treasury, especially with the ERPs, they kind of get the short end of the stick, because the ERP systems are not built for the treasurers. So I think part of what I've been doing a lot lately is just advocating for the treasury team and saying, hey, you guys need to step up now while you have Deloitte, pulling in Oracle, and get what you need, because you're going to be in a really tough situation 12 months, 18 months from now when we go live. So let's get you, what you need from an operations and systems perspective, while, it's a current live project and we don't have to bring back in the consultants to figure things out and add in another layer of expense.
No, you actually bring up a really good point there, because as we monitor the different markets, I've seen an uptick in needs for Oracle and SAP, and just those ERP implementation consultants and people with that specialization. So sounds like maybe, well, you're obviously have your thumb on the pulse of the market, but like you're starting to see this in the background too, where you're seeing a greater need for systems integration people trying to get in front of this, because maybe that was exposed over the course of the pandemic.
Absolutely. And the digitalization, I mean, that's just taken a fast track. I mean, we were kind of, the big companies were doing the ERP integrations at one point in time, but now, I mean, everyone sees the value of digitalization and getting everything, onto the cloud in one way, shape, or form. So it's really an opportunity to do that. But again, you can't forget about the risk management. You can't, throw all your payments on a payment file and not know, what the exchange rate looks like, not knowing from a procurement perspective, what the exchange rate is on the contract and that sort of thing. I mean, you kind of have to walk through a number of different conversations before you get there. And I see a lot of companies just getting pushed to, what's the quickest solution to get us there? But it could really, hurt you at the end of the day.
So it's actually related to the last points that you both made. We do have a question from our audience. Zolt, thank you for asking this question. I'm sure there's a lot of people who want to know the answer. And the essence of the question is, if for this individual in particular, you'd like to go the route of consulting. So Amanda, any recommendations on how to take that path successfully?
I don't know. I'm not a consultant, unfortunately. I'm just a practitioner with a lot of experience. I think that I've talked to a lot of companies and they've been pointed towards consultants and they kind of shy away from using consultants because you know, it's a business model and, you're paying for a consultant. You're really paying for a good consultant and you may not necessarily get the value proposition that you're looking for. You may just get a report and more complicated process. So I would say, get the practitioner experience and then try to go into consulting because at least it gives you some value add as you go into that process. And I think, being a banker or being a practitioner on the startup fintech side or what have you, I mean, they're very different worlds. But I think clients, some clients want to hire Deloitte and they're going to hire Deloitte and they're going to pay the price. And then some people are going to rely on a practitioner and, have the value add of that one practitioner and bring them into the mix. And, that's the way that they approach the problem. So, look at it and see where you want to go. But just having something on your resume definitely helps start the conversation regardless. So just get the projects under your belt and then see where the opportunities take you.
Yeah, we talk with, exactly to that point, we talk with quite a few consulting companies that prefer to go, hey, I need a practitioner who's ready to take that next step or is open to the travel or is open to just going to be a firefighter or specializes in one area. I mean, it's really just kind of, from my perspective, taking a look around, see where your company or the companies that you've worked for, where they might pay for external help and maybe trying to specialize or really hone in on that skill set because you're going to catch the attention of somebody.
That, and I can speak to the practitioner side. I mean, we have ways of making things work from a cost perspective. So if there's a certain type of technology that you're looking for, we have partnerships and we're able to make it work because that's the problem with Treasury on a whole is they don't necessarily have the budget to go out and hire a consultant and say we want to do this and get the budget for it and so forth and so on. So I think working with people who can be a little creative and pull in different partners and get you where you need to be from a product standpoint and a price standpoint. Price being cheap or free because you're giving that business to the practitioner, but the practitioner, you've got a pricing agreement and so forth and so on. I think that's really what we're seeing more of because the budgets are not there. They weren't really there before and they're certainly not there now.
Yeah, it definitely takes the creative figure it out mindset before you even want to get into the consulting space.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So this is a little bit more pointed question for you, Amanda. For Treasury practitioners who are new to digitization in the fintech space and want to, quote, upskill, what areas should they focus on in terms of learning or experiences should they pursue?
That's a good question. I think, when I was kind of getting into it as a practitioner on the bank side, I was just doing research on the ERP system. So, all the information's out there. Learn your ERP systems, the big ones, and then, also the smaller ones, and the treasury management systems, know how they play together. And, it's all on YouTube. It's all out there, it's not secret information. So I definitely would say, know your ERP systems, know your treasury management systems, know what the banks are doing and know what the banks are doing well. And then also look at some of the other kind of ancillary players in the market who are providing, a software or a kind of add-on product that is really, really changing making a big dramatic impact on the process. So there are a lot of those out there, from the payables, receivables, foreign exchange perspective. So kind of know who those players are as well.
Yeah, and it ties into the mindset that we've had in a couple of different conversations or the logic that we've followed in a couple of different conversations where it's pop your head up, don't just focus on your own role. Figure out the ecosystem around you and how that operates, whether it's technology, people, processes, cash coming in, going out, whatever it is. Just learn the entire thing, and that's how you make yourself invaluable.
Absolutely. And learn reconciliation and reporting, right? I mean, that's not the fun part. Everybody wants payments, right? I mean, payments is like the hot, sexy, you want to stay in that space, and, everyone wants your payment file. Well, what value add are you bringing if you're like, oh, just give me your payment file? That's nothing, It starts from working capital perspective, debt equity, I mean, there's a larger, broader financial and accounting conversation behind it. So understand how to talk about that, and then the products just kind of follow from there.
Scotty, do we have anything else?
Great. No, we don't. I guess just one last call to the community here. If you have any additional questions, now is the time. Michael, thanks for the great question, by the way. I'm not seeing anything come through, guys. So I don't want to. I'm going to let Joe take you off the hot seat, Amanda. It looks like we're to that point now.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Amanda, again for joining us and answering our questions. And, I felt it was a great conversation. And Treasury community, again, thanks for chiming in. Thanks for watching us. We'll be here again, same time, same channel, same place next week on Simon's Profile on LinkedIn Live. But with that, Amanda, we'll turn you loose. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you. And, I'm very grateful for the opportunity. If there's anyone out there who has any follow-up questions, or if there's anything I can do for you, definitely reach out. I'm on LinkedIn, and, more than happy to make connections or what have you. So, very, very appreciative, and thank you for all the work that you all do.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too. Take care.